In this example, we are going to learn how to create a frequency distribution for this quantitative variable called payment. We're going to assume this is payments made by a company to its business partners. So the first thing we must do is click on A1. We're going to make use of the pivot table options in Excel. We're going to click on the Insert tab. We're going to select Pivot Table. Here you need to make sure that the table range has your entire data set selected, including the label. Next, you're going to click on where you want to place this new table that you're going to build. I'm going to use the existing worksheet and I'm going to place it right here. You can select any cell you want. Field has opened up on the right hand side and you can see that the payment label is showing. So if you had more field names or field labels, you will see a lot more listed here. So now we're going to click on the payment field. Here you'll notice that it has been placed under values. If you don't see it there, you can always drag and drop it right here. However, here right now you're seeing sum. As you guys know, in a frequency distribution table, the frequency column is not the sum, it's the count. So you're basically counting how many values are in each class. So let's go ahead and change that to count. The next thing you want to do is place payments under rows. Okay, so you can already see your pivot table or your frequency distribution table forming. Now we can close this section. So this first column here, which is your different classes, this needs to be fixed. If it was a categorical variable, you would see the different categories listed here. But since this is a quantitative variable, we need to do one more step. You will click anywhere on the value, right click, and select group. So under here, you notice that the lowest value seems to be 300 and the highest value seems to be 1626. So here you can decide, what do you want to set your lower limit or your starting class limit to be? I'm going to leave it at default at 300 and I'm going to end it at 1700. Again, this is your decision, which starting limit you want to set and which ending limit you want to set. Here, by is basically referring to the class width, the class interval. What is the distance between each of your classes? What do you want to set this? Usually, rule of thumb is use multiples of 5, use multiples of 10. Here, as a researcher, you can decide whether you want your variables to be grouped a little bit closer in your frequency distribution table, or if you want to see more spaces in between them. So here I'm just going to select 200. Okay. So here you can see that the frequency distribution table has been built. Now, of course, you can do a little bit of formatting. You can choose a design that you like. And you can of course change the names of these labels here. So this I'm going to call it payment, and the second I'm going to call it frequency. You can of course format the width, middle align. Okay. Now using this frequency distribution table, we're going to create a histogram. So let's go ahead and select our data set. Click on the Insert tab. Click on a 2D column. So in a histogram, we know that there are no spaces in between the columns. This can be easily made after you select a column chart. You're just going to right click on it. Click on Format Data Series. And when this section opens up, you will see an option called gap width. So let's go ahead and reduce it to 0%. You can close this box. So this is how easily you can create a histogram using your frequency distribution table. Another check you want to do is the total of your frequency column. You can go ahead and count the values in your data set and make sure that it matches this total here. If it doesn't, that means there was a mistake made somewhere. So this is a good place to double check. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to calculate sample standard deviation and sample variance for this quantitative variable. So let's use the sample standard deviation formula. So as you guys know, in Excel you have the stdev.p, which is for your population data set, and since here we're looking for the sample data set sample standard deviation calculation, we're using the stdev.s function. Okay, when the bracket opens up, you need to select your data set, and then you can close your bracket, press enter. This is again your standard deviation, your sample standard deviation, let's specify. Okay, next we're going to find the sample variance. Again in Excel, we're going to use the var.s function. So if it was for a population, you would be using the var.p function. So since we're looking at sample variance, we're going to click on var.s. Then we're going to select our data set, close the bracket. You can also make use of the formula bar if it's easier. So this is our sample variance, and this is our standard deviation. Now let's take a minute to interpret what this means. The variance represents the average of the squared deviations from the mean, and the standard deviation, which is 360.67 for our data set, is the square root of this variance. Both the variance and the standard deviation are used as measures to describe the variation around the mean for a data set. However, we do see the standard deviation being used more often than the variance. But Excel makes it much easier for us to calculate them both.